We partied until dawn after my widowed Apache. Neighbor invited me on Christmas Eve. The snow had stopped falling hours ago, leaving a soft, white blanket that glistened under the dim glow of streetlights. The air smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke from chimneys, and distant carolers' voices drifted softly through the night. But despite the gentle charm of the evening, the narrator walked alone, carrying a small bag of groceries, feeling the weight of loneliness pressing heavily on their shoulders. Christmas had always been a complicated holiday for them. As a child, it had been bright and magical, filled with laughter, family dinners, and the excitement of gifts. But in recent years, life had become quieter, emptier, and Christmas had turned into a stark reminder of what was missing. The narrator had hoped to spend the evening curled up at home with a book or a movie, trying to convince themselves that solitude could feel comforting. Yet walking through the softly lit streets, the cold air seemed to echo the emptiness inside, making their steps slower, more hesitant. As they trudged along the sidewalk, a familiar figure appeared at the corner of the street. It was Marissa, their neighbor, a widowed Apache woman in her late 60s. Her hair was streaked with silver, pulled back neatly, and her eyes held a warmth that seemed to invite trust and kindness. She waved at the narrator, a small smile playing at her lips. Marissa had always been polite but reserved, often keeping to herself after the loss of her husband a few years ago. The neighborhood had whispered quietly about her solitude, but the narrator had only ever seen the gentlest, quietest version of her, never imagining that she could reach out so openly on a night like this. "Hello there," Marissa said, her voice soft but clear, carrying an unusual energy that made the narrator pause. "I didn't expect to see you out this evening. Are you alone for Christmas?" The narrator hesitated, unsure how to answer. They weren't used to people noticing their quiet presence and certainly not reaching out. "Yes," they said finally, their voice small against the stillness of the snowy street. "I was just walking home." Marissa's eyes softened. She placed a gentle hand on the gate beside her, beckoning slightly. "Why don't you come over for a bit? I'm having a few friends tonight, nothing fancy, just a small gathering. It's Christmas Eve, after all. It can be lonely to spend it alone." The narrator blinked, caught off guard. They had seen Marissa from a distance many times, waving politely or exchanging small pleasantries over the fence. They had never imagined being invited into her home, especially on a night like this. A mix of curiosity and nervousness fluttered in their chest. "Are you sure?" they asked. Marissa nodded, her smile gentle but firm. "Absolutely. You don't have to stay long if you don't want to, but it would be nice to have some company." For a moment, the narrator considered making excuses. They could politely decline and retreat to the warmth of their apartment, avoiding the awkwardness of an unfamiliar gathering. But something in Marissa's expression, the quiet openness, the lack of pretense, the subtle strength of someone who had endured loss yet continued to embrace life, made their decision. There was a sincerity in her invitation that felt rare, a human warmth that seemed to push back against the chill of loneliness outside. "Okay," the narrator said softly. "I'll come." Marissa's smile brightened, and she motioned for them to follow her up the snowy path to her front door. As they walked, the crunch of their boots on the fresh snow was the only sound, and the narrator felt a strange sense of anticipation. They didn't know what awaited them inside, but the possibility of connection, even fleeting, stirred a quiet excitement within them. The front door opened to reveal a cozy interior. Warm golden light spilled into the snowy evening, and the scent of baked goods, cinnamon and pine, immediately wrapped around the narrator like a comforting blanket. The living room was modest but welcoming. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, adorned with simple ornaments, some shiny and new, others clearly aged and cherished over many years. Twinkling lights reflected off delicate glass decorations, and a few handmade garlands added a personal touch. The scene was quiet, but it was alive with care, attention, and a quiet love for the season. Marissa gestured for the narrator to step inside. "Make yourself comfortable. Can I take your coat?" "Yes, thank you," the narrator replied, feeling slightly awkward but more at ease than they had expected. Marissa hung up the coat and motioned toward a chair near the fireplace. "Sit down. Can I get you some tea or cocoa? We've got some cookies too." The narrator accepted a cup of hot cocoa, the warmth seeping into their hands and spreading slowly through their chest. They sank into the chair, taking in the small details of the room, the old photographs on the mantel, the hand-carved figurines, and the soft blankets draped over the sofa. Each object seemed to tell a story, a silent testament to a life lived fully, even if tinged with sorrow. Marissa moved about the kitchen, attending to preparations with practiced ease. Occasionally, she would glance toward the narrator and smile, making quiet conversation about small things: the snow, the town, the unpredictability of winter weather. The narrator found themselves relaxing, their initial apprehension giving way to a gentle curiosity. They wondered about Marissa's life, about the stories she carried with her, and about the resilience required to continue finding joy after deep loss. Other guests began arriving slowly. A few neighbors and friends whom the narrator had seen at a distance joined in, each bringing small dishes or bottles of wine. Everyone greeted each other warmly, and the room gradually filled with soft chatter and laughter. The narrator noticed how naturally Marissa welcomed everyone, her presence commanding attention without needing to dominate the conversation. She seemed to know exactly when to speak and when to let others share their voices, creating an atmosphere of inclusion and comfort. The narrator sat quietly at first, sipping cocoa and observing the interactions. Yet, as the evening progressed, they began to feel a part of the small circle. Someone shared a humorous story about a previous Christmas mishap, and a ripple of laughter passed through the room. Another guest offered a song, and soon Marissa was encouraging everyone to join in, clapping along to the music that played softly in the background. In the midst of the laughter and music, the narrator caught Marissa's eyes across the room. There was a sparkle there, a quiet triumph of spirit, as though she were silently acknowledging the small miracle of connection happening tonight. Despite her own grief, she had opened her home and heart, and in doing so, had allowed strangers and neighbors alike to experience a sense of belonging, if only for a few hours. Time seemed to slow, the snow outside forgotten, the cold irrelevant. The narrator found themselves laughing along, sharing small anecdotes, and even participating in a brief, clumsy dance when Marissa playfully coaxed them into standing. The awkwardness they had felt when first walking up to her door had dissolved entirely. In its place was a gentle warmth, a sense of being seen and accepted in a way that had been missing for many quiet Christmases past. Later, Marissa pulled a small album from the shelf, filled with photographs of her late husband, family gatherings, and moments of quiet joy. She shared stories behind each image, some humorous, some tender, and some bittersweet. The narrator listened intently, drawn into the tapestry of memories that Marissa wove with each turn of the page. Through her stories, they glimpsed a life of love, resilience, and the courage to continue finding meaning despite profound loss. As the evening stretched on, the narrator realized that this small gathering was more than a casual party. It was an unspoken act of healing, a shared human experience that bridged gaps of loneliness, age, and circumstance. It was about community, compassion, and the quiet magic of opening one's home to another human being without hesitation or judgment. By the time the clock neared midnight, the narrator felt a warmth that had little to do with cocoa or the fire. It was the warmth of acceptance, of connection, and of the unexpected joy that can bloom when someone chooses to reach out with genuine kindness. They knew that this Christmas Eve, this invitation from a widowed neighbor, would remain etched in their memory for years to come. not just as a night of laughter and music, but as a reminder of the simple power of human connection. When the narrator finally left Marissa's home that night, stepping back into the softly falling snow, they felt lighter, more hopeful, and profoundly grateful. The loneliness that had seemed so heavy only hours before had been replaced by a quiet sense of belonging. And as they walked home, their heart carried the warmth of the evening, the laughter, the music, the stories, and above all, the unspoken gift of someone who had chosen to open their life and their heart to a stranger on Christmas Eve. After the narrator accepted Marissa's invitation and stepped inside her warm, inviting home, they quickly realized that the evening was unfolding into something far more extraordinary than they had expected. The initial nervousness that had clung to them like a second layer of clothing melted away under the gentle glow of the fireplace and the welcoming smiles of Marissa and the other guests. The living room was modest but full of character, every corner telling a story of the life Marissa had led, a life full of love, loss, and quiet strength. Marissa, ever the attentive host, moved gracefully through the room, offering small plates of cookies and pastries to everyone and making sure that each guest felt included. The narrator noticed the way she interacted with people, listening intently when someone spoke, laughing softly at jokes, and gently encouraging the quieter ones to share their thoughts. There was a rhythm to her hospitality, a careful balance between activity and calm, and it made the narrator feel instantly at ease. The other guests were a mix of neighbors and longtime friends. Some were older, with the lines of years etched gently on their faces, while others were younger, curious and animated, eager to celebrate the evening. Despite their differences in age and background, there was a harmony among them, a shared understanding that Christmas Eve was a time to come together, to create warmth and connection in the midst of winter's chill. The narrator felt like an observer at first, quietly taking in the scene, but gradually the atmosphere pulled them into its embrace. Marissa led the narrator to a small corner near the fireplace and began sharing stories from her past. She spoke softly, but her words were vivid, painting pictures of her youth, her family, and the life she had shared with her late husband. She described long walks through the forests near her childhood home, quiet evenings by the fire, and the simple joys of family gatherings. Each story was infused with a sense of nostalgia, but also with resilience, the kind of quiet courage that comes from having experienced deep love and profound loss. As the narrator listened, they felt a deep connection forming, not just to Marissa, but to the very essence of her life and experiences. They were drawn into her world, feeling the laughter and the heartbreak as if it were their own. Marissa spoke of her husband with tenderness, recounting the small, everyday moments that had meant so much. The way he used to make coffee in the mornings, the songs he hummed while working in the garden, and the way he could make anyone smile with a simple gesture or a joke. The narrator realized that these memories were not just stories. They were treasures, carefully preserved in the heart of a woman who had learned to carry love forward even after losing someone so dear. Occasionally, Marissa's eyes would flicker with a hint of sadness, and the narrator understood that grief was never far from her mind. But it was never overwhelming. Instead, it existed alongside joy, laughter, and the warmth of companionship. There was a lesson in this balance, a reminder that life could hold sorrow and happiness at the same time, and that embracing both was what gave the human experience its depth and richness. The narrator began to notice small details around the room that spoke volumes about Marissa's life. On the mantel above the fireplace, there were framed photographs of family gatherings, each one capturing moments of happiness, love, and togetherness. There were small trinkets from her travels, gifts from friends, and handmade crafts that added a personal touch to the space. Everything had a story, and the narrator felt privileged to witness this intimate glimpse into a life that was both ordinary and extraordinary. The evening continued with gentle music playing in the background, a mix of traditional Christmas carols and soft instrumental tunes. Marissa encouraged the guests to sing along if they wished, and soon, voices mingled in harmony, filling the room with a sense of celebration and unity. The narrator hesitated at first, unsure of their singing voice, but Marissa's warm encouragement and the easy camaraderie of the group made them feel safe enough to join in. Their voice was tentative at first, but as the song progressed, they found themselves laughing, singing with more confidence, and even swaying to the rhythm. Laughter became a constant companion that evening. Stories of past Christmases, funny mishaps, and little family traditions were shared with warmth and humor. One guest recounted a tale of a Christmas tree that had toppled over mid-decoration, sending ornaments scattering across the floor. Another told of a holiday dinner that went hilariously wrong when a turkey refused to cook properly. Each story was met with laughter and nods of understanding, and the narrator felt the comforting realization that everyone had experienced both joy and chaos, and that sharing these moments brought people closer together. Marissa also shared stories about Apache traditions and customs that had been passed down through generations. She spoke of the importance of family, respect for elders, and the value of community. She explained certain rituals, like lighting candles to honor ancestors or preparing specific foods that carried cultural significance. The narrator listened with fascination, appreciating the depth of history and heritage embedded in these simple acts. There was a beauty in the continuity of tradition, in how past and present intertwined to create meaning in everyday life. As the night progressed, the narrator found themselves engaging more with the other guests. Conversations flowed naturally, shifting from stories to laughter, to reflections on life, and even to shared dreams and hopes for the future. There was a sense of openness, a willingness to listen and be heard, that made the narrator feel included in something larger than themselves. They realized that this gathering was not just a party, it was a living, breathing example of community, of connection, and of the human capacity to support one another. At one point, Marissa invited everyone to participate in a small game, a tradition she had started with her friends years ago. It involved sharing memories, answering light-hearted questions, and finding commonalities among the group. The narrator hesitated again, unsure of how they would fit in, but the warmth and inclusivity of the room encouraged them to join. To their surprise, they laughed freely, shared stories, and even discovered unexpected connections with people they had just met. The game became a bridge, linking strangers through shared experiences and mutual understanding. By the time midnight approached, the snow outside had returned, falling gently and dusting the town in a fresh layer of white. The narrator looked around the room and noticed the transformation that had taken place within them. The initial feelings of loneliness and isolation had given way to a profound sense of belonging. They were no longer an observer but a participant, woven into the fabric of the evening, sharing in the warmth, laughter, and stories that defined the gathering. Marissa's presence remained a constant anchor throughout the night. Her gentle guidance, her quiet strength, and her ability to make everyone feel valued created an environment where connection could flourish. The narrator realized that it was not just the party itself, but the care and intention behind it that made the evening so special. Marissa had opened her home, her heart, and her life to others, creating a space where joy and healing coexisted, and where even a stranger could feel like family. As the clock ticked closer to the early hours of Christmas morning, the narrator found themselves reflecting on the significance of the night. It was a reminder that kindness, openness, and genuine human connection could transform even the quietest, loneliest moments into something beautiful and meaningful. They felt gratitude not only for Marissa's invitation, but for the courage it took to accept it, to step into the unknown and allow themselves to be part of a community that welcomed them without reservation. The evening slowly wound down, but the warmth lingered. Guests began to leave in pairs or small groups, each one expressing thanks and sharing hugs before stepping back into the snow-covered streets. The narrator stayed a while longer, savoring the final moments by the fire, listening to Marissa's soft humming as she tidied the room, and feeling the quiet, steady pulse of life in the home. There was a peace here, a calm that contrasted with the bustling chaos of the outside world, and it was a peace that the narrator would carry with them long after the night ended. By the time the narrator finally prepared to leave, the first hints of dawn were appearing on the horizon, casting a soft pink glow over the snow. They stepped outside, breathing in the crisp, cold air, and felt a lightness in their chests that had been absent for many Christmases past. The night had been more than a gathering. It had been a gift of connection, of shared stories, and of the simple, enduring power of human kindness. As they walked home, their footsteps crunching in the fresh snow, the narrator smiled to themselves. They knew that this night would remain etched in their memory, not just as a Christmas Eve spent at a neighbor's house, but as a moment when loneliness gave way to belonging, when strangers became friends, and when the quiet magic of life revealed itself in the most unexpected ways. And in the distance, Marissa's home glowed softly, a beacon of warmth, tradition, and heart, a reminder that sometimes the simplest invitations can lead to the most profound experiences. The warmth of Marissa's home was more than just the heat from the fireplace. It was a living, breathing presence that seemed to fill every corner of the room. The narrator, now feeling comfortable and part of the gathering, noticed how the energy in the room began to shift. Marissa, with her characteristic gentle enthusiasm, moved to the small stereo in the corner and began to set up a playlist of music for the evening. It was a mix of traditional Christmas songs, Apache tunes that carried the history of her people, and light-hearted melodies that invited movement and joy. "Who wants to dance?" Marissa asked, her eyes twinkling with playful excitement. There was no pressure in her question, only an open invitation to share in the simple pleasure of music and movement. The narrator hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar pang of self-consciousness. They had never considered themselves much of a dancer and worried that their clumsy steps might seem awkward among the others. One of the guests, a woman in her 40s named Clara, laughed softly and took the narrator's hand. "Come on," she said warmly. "It doesn't matter if you're perfect, just have fun." The narrator felt a rush of relief and amusement. Maybe it didn't matter if their movements were uncoordinated. Maybe it was about connection, about laughter and shared joy. As the music began, the narrator and Clara moved awkwardly at first, swaying in time with the rhythm. But soon, the awkwardness gave way to a kind of liberation. Laughter bubbled up from both of them, and the narrator realized that no one was judging, that everyone was too busy enjoying themselves, lost in the spirit of the night. Marissa clapped along from the corner, encouraging everyone to let go of inhibitions and join in. The dancing became a central part of the evening. People paired up, formed small groups, or danced alone, each moving to the beat in their own way. Some were graceful and practiced, others comically clumsy, but every movement was filled with joy and connection. The narrator, caught up in the energy, began to move more freely, letting the music guide their steps. They felt a strange exhilaration, a sense of freedom they had not experienced in years. Between songs, laughter and conversation filled the room. Stories were shared about past Christmas dances, childhood memories, and family traditions. Marissa told a story about her first dance with her late husband, how he had stepped on her toes repeatedly, but had managed to make her laugh through every mistake. The narrator could see the joy in her eyes as she recounted the memory, a bittersweet mixture of nostalgia and love. Music and dancing were not the only sources of connection that evening. Guests took turns sharing personal stories, small victories, and challenges they had faced over the past year. Marissa encouraged each person to speak, listening intently and responding with empathy and understanding. The narrator found themselves opening up about their own experiences, speaking of quiet moments of loneliness, fleeting happiness, and the hope for better days. To their surprise, the room responded with warmth and compassion. Strangers offered words of encouragement, small gestures of kindness, and a listening ear. It was in these moments that the narrator truly began to understand the depth of Marissa's spirit. Her ability to create a space where people felt safe, accepted, and valued was remarkable. She seemed to understand, instinctively, how to balance light-hearted fun with emotional depth, how to honor memories of loss while celebrating life. The narrator felt fortunate to witness it firsthand, realizing that this evening was not merely a party, it was a lesson in the power of human connection. The dancing continued late into the night, each song bringing a new wave of energy and laughter. At one point, Marissa brought out a small set of maracas and other simple instruments, inviting everyone to participate. The narrator picked up a pair of maracas hesitantly at first, unsure of how to use them, but the rhythm soon guided their hands. The sound of shaking instruments blended with laughter, singing, and conversation, creating a vibrant, joyous symphony. For the first time in a long while, the narrator felt completely immersed in the moment, free from the worries and pressures of the outside world. As the music played, the narrator observed the interactions around them. There was a mixture of generations, from older guests who moved with a quiet dignity to younger ones who laughed and twirled with unrestrained energy. Despite the differences in age and experience, there was harmony, a sense of belonging that transcended individual circumstances. The narrator felt a profound appreciation for the way Marissa had brought everyone together, how her presence and guidance allowed people to connect across boundaries and differences. During a slower song, Marissa invited everyone to form a circle. She suggested that each person share something they were grateful for this year. The narrator listened as one guest spoke of family health, another of a small personal achievement, and yet another of a meaningful friendship. When it was the narrator's turn, they hesitated, feeling the vulnerability of speaking in front of people they had only just met. But the warmth in the room encouraged them, and they spoke quietly about finding unexpected kindness and connection on this very night. There was a gentle murmur of approval and smiles of understanding. The narrator felt seen in a way they had not anticipated, recognized not for accomplishments or status, but simply for being present and sharing their truth. Marissa reached out, placing a reassuring hand on the narrator's shoulder, and whispered, "It's always a gift to share your heart." The words were simple, but they carried weight, and the narrator felt a deep sense of gratitude for her guidance and wisdom. After the circle of gratitude, the music picked up again, and the dancing resumed with renewed energy. The narrator found themselves swept up in a series of lively group dances, joining hands with others, laughing at the clumsiness of some steps, and cheering at the enthusiasm of those who moved with abandon. Each song seemed to deepen the sense of camaraderie, creating bonds that, though newly formed, felt surprisingly strong. At one point, Marissa suggested a playful dance game. She called out a series of fun challenges, spinning, hopping, or dancing in a circle, and everyone participated enthusiastically. The room erupted with laughter as people stumbled, twirled, and tried to keep up with the fast pace. The narrator, who had initially felt self-conscious, found themselves laughing until their cheeks hurt, delighted by the infectious energy of the group. It was an experience that transcended skill or technique. It was about joy, spontaneity, and being fully present. Amidst the dancing and music, quiet conversations continued to unfold in corners of the room. Guests shared deeper stories, personal struggles, and moments of vulnerability. Marissa listened with patience, offering gentle advice and thoughtful reflections. The narrator joined a small group discussing traditions and memories, contributing insights and learning about the rich tapestry of lives represented in the room. The night had become a blend of exuberant celebration and meaningful dialogue, a balance that made it unique and memorable. As the hours passed, the narrator realized that something profound was occurring. The dancing, music, and laughter were more than entertainment. They were expressions of connection, of shared humanity. The simple acts of moving together, laughing together, and speaking openly were building bonds that might last far beyond this single night. The narrator felt a sense of inclusion and belonging that had been missing for years, a quiet reassurance that even in moments of solitude, human connection could bloom unexpectedly. Marissa, observing the group, smiled quietly to herself. She knew that her late husband would have appreciated this evening, that he would have recognized the importance of keeping traditions alive, of creating spaces where people could celebrate life while honoring memories of loved ones. Her ability to host this gathering, to weave music, dance, and conversation into a single experience, was her way of continuing to honor him and the values they had shared together. As the clock approached the early hours of the morning, the music slowed, transitioning to softer, more reflective tunes. The room's energy became gentler, with guests gathering near the fireplace or sitting in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones. The narrator, still holding the maracas, felt a calm contentment, a sense of having participated in something rare and precious. They understood that this night was not just a celebration of Christmas, but a celebration of life itself, the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of community, and the simple joys that could bring people together. Finally, Marissa gathered everyone for one last song, a quiet, heartfelt melody that resonated deeply. Guests sang softly, voices blending in harmony, creating a moment of unity and reflection. The narrator joined in, their voice steady and confident, feeling the power of the shared experience. The room seemed to glow with warmth, not just from the fire or lights, but from the genuine connection that had grown among the group over the course of the evening. By the time the final note faded, the narrator felt a mixture of exhaustion and elation. They had laughed, danced, and shared pieces of their heart with people they had only just met. They had witnessed the strength and warmth of Marissa, learned about traditions, shared stories, and discovered the joy of being fully present in a moment of human connection. It was a night that would stay with them forever, a memory of kindness, inclusion, and the transformative power of music, dance, and shared laughter. As the lively energy of the night began to settle, the remaining guests gathered closer to the fireplace. The snow outside had grown quiet, leaving the world in a peaceful hush. And inside, the room glowed with the soft flicker of the fire and the gentle warmth of lamps. Marissa motioned for everyone to sit near her, forming a small circle on the cozy chairs and rugs she had arranged. The room felt intimate now, a stark contrast to the earlier laughter and dancing, yet no less alive. There was a sense that the heart of the evening was shifting, from celebration to reflection, from movement to stillness. The narrator sank into one of the chairs, sipping the last of their warm cocoa. They felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and contentment. The laughter, music, and dancing had been liberating, yet there was something about this quiet moment that felt even more profound. Marissa, noticing their thoughtful expression, gave them a gentle smile. "It's in the quiet moments," she said softly, "that we often see things most clearly." She began speaking about her life, choosing her words carefully, as if weaving a delicate tapestry with each sentence. She told stories of her late husband, Robert, describing not just the grand moments, but the simple, ordinary ones that had filled their years together. She spoke of the quiet mornings they had shared over coffee, the long walks in the woods near their home, and the way he always managed to make her laugh even in difficult times. The narrator listened intently, captivated not only by the stories themselves, but by the love and tenderness that flowed through Marissa's voice. There was a gentle sadness in her words, a reminder of the loss she had endured, yet it was paired with a strength that was inspiring. She described how life had changed after Robert passed, the emptiness she had felt, and the long nights when memories threatened to overwhelm her. And yet, she spoke of finding ways to honor him, to carry his memory forward in small acts of kindness and tradition. Her resilience shone through, a quiet testament to the human capacity to endure hardship while still embracing life. The narrator felt a wave of empathy. They realized that grief was not something to hide, nor a sign of weakness. It was a part of living, a reflection of love that had once been shared. Listening to Marissa, they understood that loss could coexist with joy, that remembering someone could be both painful and beautiful, and that choosing to continue living fully was an act of courage. For the first time in many years, the narrator felt the presence of hope mingling with sorrow, a delicate but powerful balance that brought a sense of peace. Others in the circle began to share their own reflections. Clara, the lively woman who had danced earlier, spoke of a family member she had lost, of how she struggled to carry on without them, and how nights like this reminded her of the importance of community. Another guest, a young man named Leo, spoke of a personal challenge he had faced that year, of how he had felt alone and uncertain, and of how small gestures of kindness had given him strength. The narrator listened, their hearts swelling with empathy and understanding, feeling a deep connection to each person in the room. Marissa encouraged everyone to speak freely, to share what was in their hearts, and the room became a sanctuary for honesty and emotion. The narrator, who had initially come as a quiet observer, found themselves opening up. They spoke of the loneliness they often felt, the quiet nights spent alone, and the longing for connection that had brought them to Marissa's door. Their voice wavered at first, but the warmth and attentiveness of the group encouraged them to continue. When they finished, there was a gentle murmur of support, soft smiles, and nods of understanding. It was a moment of vulnerability met with compassion, a reminder that speaking one's truth could be healing. Marissa, noticing the narrator's openness, reached out and placed her hand gently on theirs. "Sharing our hearts," she said, "is one of the bravest things we can do. It allows others to see us, to understand us, and to walk alongside us in life's journey." Her words resonated deeply, and the narrator felt a quiet gratitude for the trust and care that had been extended to them tonight. As the hours passed, the conversation shifted to stories of resilience and hope. Marissa shared how, after her husband's passing, she had learned to find small joys in everyday life. She spoke of tending to her garden, preparing traditional meals, and connecting with neighbors and friends. Each story highlighted the ways in which she nurtured herself and others, creating a web of support that brought meaning and purpose even in the face of loss. The narrator reflected on their own life in comparison. They had often overlooked small joys, distracted by worries or the pace of routine. Listening to Marissa, they realized that moments of connection, acts of kindness, and the courage to share openly could transform life in ways that nothing else could. They felt inspired to carry this lesson forward, to be more present, and to seek opportunities to connect meaningfully with others. The room became quieter, the voices softer as the night deepened. Some guests had drifted to the windows to watch the snow falling outside, while others sat close to the fire, lost in thought. The narrator found themselves drawn into the stillness, appreciating the contrast to the earlier exuberance of dancing and music. There was a gentle magic in this quiet, the way the firelight flickered across faces, the soft hum of the wind outside, and the sense of shared experience that wrapped around the room like a comforting blanket. Marissa invited the narrator to help her bring out a small photo album. Inside were photographs of her family, her late husband, and moments of joy spanning decades. Each picture carried a story, and as she shared them, the narrator felt transported through time. There were photographs of Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, family gatherings, and quiet afternoons spent together. Each image was infused with love, laughter, and the subtle poignancy of moments that could never be relived, only remembered. One photograph in particular caught the narrator's attention. It was of Marissa and her husband sitting by a river, smiling at the camera, holding hands. The image radiated happiness, simplicity, and connection. Marissa explained that this had been a favorite spot for them, a place where they could escape the busyness of life and simply enjoy each other's presence. The narrator felt a lump in their throat, touched by the beauty of a love that had endured, and saddened by the knowledge of its loss. Yet the memory carried warmth as well, a reminder that love never truly disappears. It lives on in stories, traditions, and the hearts of those who remember. As the night wore on, Marissa shared some of the traditions she had grown up with in the Apache community. She spoke of how families would come together during holidays, not just to celebrate but to honor ancestors, to share stories, and to reinforce bonds within the community. She explained the symbolism of certain foods, the importance of songs, and the rituals that had been passed down through generations. The narrator listened, fascinated, absorbing not just the details, but the deeper lesson of continuity, respect, and connection that underpinned each tradition. The conversation gradually turned to the future. Marissa encouraged everyone to think about what they hoped for in the coming year, not in terms of material success, but in terms of personal growth, connection, and kindness. Guests shared their aspirations, small but meaningful goals like spending more time with loved ones, learning something new, or helping others in simple ways. The narrator felt inspired by the thoughtfulness and sincerity of each response. It was a reminder that hope and intention could be powerful forces, even in ordinary lives. Time seemed to blur as the night moved closer to dawn. The quiet reflections, heartfelt stories, and shared laughter created a sense of timelessness, a moment suspended between the past and the future. The narrator felt both humbled and uplifted by the depth of the experience. They realized that life's most meaningful moments often arose unexpectedly, in spaces created by kindness, openness, and genuine connection. Marissa, noticing the narrator's reflective expression, offered a gentle smile. "It's in nights like these," she said, "that we remember what matters most: love, connection, and the courage to keep living fully, even when life has brought us loss or loneliness." Her words resonated deeply, echoing in the narrator's heart. They felt a profound gratitude for her generosity, for the space she had created, and for the lessons embedded in her stories and presence. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, the narrator looked around the room. The remaining guests were quiet, some still speaking in soft tones, others simply sitting and absorbing the tranquility of the moment. There was a shared understanding, unspoken yet palpable, that the night had been extraordinary. It had been more than a gathering, it had been a sanctuary, a celebration of life, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. Finally, Marissa rose and addressed the small group. "Tonight has been special," she said softly. "Thank you all for sharing your hearts, your laughter, and your presence. May we carry the warmth and connection of this evening into every day that follows." The narrator felt a deep sense of inclusion and belonging, realizing that this night had changed something inside them. They had come seeking companionship, and they had found not only friendship but wisdom, inspiration, and a renewed appreciation for life. As the narrator prepared to leave Marissa's home, the room now bathed in the soft morning light, they felt a quiet sense of completion. The night's celebrations, dancing, and laughter had given way to reflection, intimacy, and emotional depth. They understood that both aspects, the exuberance of joy and the quiet introspection of connection, were necessary to fully appreciate the richness of human experience. Stepping outside into the early morning, the narrator breathed in the crisp, clean air. The snow glistened in the first rays of sunlight, and the world seemed to hold a soft, renewed promise. They felt lighter, more grounded, and profoundly grateful for the unexpected gift of the evening. Marissa's invitation had brought them into a world of warmth, tradition, and connection, leaving an indelible mark on their heart. The first light of Christmas morning stretched gently across the snow-covered town, casting a soft golden glow over rooftops and streets. The quiet of the early hour was soothing, a stark contrast to the laughter, music, and dancing of the night before. The narrator stepped outside Marissa's home, feeling the crisp chill of winter air on their cheeks. Their heart was light, warmed by the experience they had just shared, yet tinged with a gentle nostalgia for the fleeting moments of connection that had passed so quickly. As they began walking home, the narrator reflected on the extraordinary night they had witnessed and participated in. What had started as a simple, unexpected invitation had blossomed into a series of profound experiences. They had danced and laughed, shared stories, and listened to Marissa recount memories of her late husband, her family, and her life. The evening had been a delicate balance of joy and reflection, celebration and quiet contemplation, and the narrator understood how rare and precious such moments were. The streets were nearly empty, the world still wrapped in the hushed calm of dawn. The narrator noticed footprints in the snow, both theirs and Marissa's guests, and felt a symbolic connection to the journey of the night. Each step seemed to carry not only their own experiences but the shared warmth, laughter, and stories of the gathering. It was as if the night itself had left a gentle imprint on the town, subtle yet unmistakable. The narrator remembered the dancing first. The awkward sways, the clumsy spins, the shared laughter with strangers who had become companions for the night, all of it felt alive in their memory. They thought about the freedom they had felt, the sense of release that came from letting go of self-consciousness and fully participating in the joy of the moment. Dancing, they realized, had been more than entertainment. It had been a bridge, connecting hearts and creating bonds that transcended words. They smiled at the memory of the music, how it had filled the room, how each song had carried its own energy, and how Marissa had masterfully woven together traditional tunes, festive melodies, and playful rhythms. Music had been the heartbeat of the evening, carrying laughter, nostalgia, and hope in its notes. The narrator felt grateful for the chance to experience that collective pulse, to move and laugh in harmony with others, and to feel a sense of belonging that had been missing in their life for too long. But the night had not been only about exuberance. The narrator's mind returned to the quiet moments near the fireplace, when Marissa had shared her memories and reflections. They recalled her stories of Robert, his kindness, humor, and gentle spirit, and how she had carried his memory with love and resilience. There was a lesson in her words, that grief could coexist with joy, that memories could be honored without preventing life from continuing, and that human connection could heal even the deepest wounds. The narrator also remembered the conversations with other guests, each one a window into different lives and experiences. Clara's reflections on loss, Leo's courage in facing challenges, and the gentle wisdom of older neighbors had all contributed to a mosaic of understanding and empathy. In those conversations, the narrator had learned not only about others but about themselves, their capacity for vulnerability, their ability to connect, and their desire to be part of a community that embraced both joy and sorrow. As they walked, the narrator felt a sense of continuity. The stories, songs, and laughter from the night before were not confined to Marissa's home. They seemed to extend outward, touching their thoughts and perspective. They realized that life was made up of these moments, small yet transformative, moments that carried the power to shape understanding, foster connection, and leave lasting impressions on the heart. The narrator approached the corner where Marissa's house had disappeared from view, leaving only a soft glow of light through the windows. They paused, wanting to capture the sense of gratitude and warmth that lingered. Marissa had invited them into her life, into her memories, and into the quiet power of her presence. She had shared her grief, her traditions, and her joy, creating a space where strangers could feel like family. It was a gift, unspoken yet profound, and the narrator felt humbled by it. Walking the remaining distance to their own home, the narrator thought about the lessons of the night. They understood now that connection did not always require long-standing friendship or shared history. Sometimes, it was built in the span of hours through openness, honesty, and genuine presence. They thought about kindness, the simple act of inviting someone in, of sharing warmth and laughter, of creating an environment where people felt safe to express themselves. Marissa had shown them that even small gestures could ripple outward, transforming lives in ways that were difficult to measure but impossible to forget. As they unlocked the door to their apartment, the narrator felt a quiet determination to carry the night's lessons forward. They wanted to be more open, to reach out to others, and to embrace opportunities for connection, even when it required courage or vulnerability. They wanted to honor the experience by living with intention, noticing the small moments of beauty, and cherishing the relationships that brought meaning to life. Inside, they set down their coat and bags, pausing for a moment to reflect. The apartment was still quiet, but it no longer felt lonely. The warmth from Marissa's home, the laughter and music, and the heartfelt stories had left an imprint on their spirit. They realized that even solitude could be enriched by memory and reflection, and that the echoes of connection could linger long after a night had ended. The narrator then thought about Marissa herself. They remembered her gentle smile, the strength in her eyes, and the way she had balanced grief and joy with grace. She had shown them the power of resilience, the importance of preserving tradition, and the quiet beauty of living fully despite loss. Her presence had been a guide, a teacher in the simplest yet most profound sense, demonstrating that generosity of spirit and openness of heart could transform not only the lives of others, but one's own as well. They recalled the photographs Marissa had shared, the images of her family, her husband, and the moments of simple happiness. Each picture had told a story, capturing love and connection, laughter and tenderness. The narrator felt inspired to create similar memories in their own life, to document joy, to celebrate connections, and to treasure moments that might otherwise pass unnoticed. The night had been a reminder that life's richness often lay in ordinary acts, smiles, dances, conversations, and shared stories. The narrator also reflected on the communal nature of the evening. Each guest had contributed something unique: energy, stories, laughter, or empathy. Together, they had created a space that was vibrant, inclusive, and healing. The narrator understood that community was not defined solely by proximity or duration, but by the willingness to show up, participate, and share authentically. This understanding left them with a renewed sense of hope, a belief in the goodness of people, and a recognition that connection could happen anywhere at any time. As dawn fully broke, the narrator stepped to the window and looked out at the soft, sparkling snow. The town seemed peaceful, quiet, and alive in its own way. They felt a sense of gratitude for the night, for Marissa's generosity, for the stories and laughter shared, and for the lessons learned. The experience had been a gift, and they resolved to honor it by carrying its warmth forward, to reach out to neighbors, to participate in community, and to embrace moments of connection without hesitation. The morning progressed, but the narrator carried the night with them. In the simple act of walking to the local cafe, greeting the barista with a smile, or noticing a child playing in the snow, they felt a heightened awareness of life's small, meaningful details. Every interaction seemed infused with possibility, every person with a story waiting to be discovered. The narrator realized that connection, once experienced, could ripple outward, affecting even the ordinary moments of daily life. Later, when the narrator returned home, they took out a small notebook and began to write. They recorded the stories Marissa had shared, their own reflections, and the emotions that had arisen over the course of the night. The act of writing was a way of preserving the memory, of honoring the experience, and of embedding the lessons learned into their own life. They wrote about the laughter, the dancing, the heartfelt conversations, and the quiet moments of reflection, ensuring that the essence of the evening would remain vivid and tangible. As the day continued, the narrator felt a sense of renewal. Christmas morning, which had once felt empty and ordinary, now seemed full of possibility. The world was brighter, the snow more sparkling, and the potential for kindness and connection more evident than ever. They understood that Marissa's invitation had been more than a social gesture. It had been a catalyst for change, a reminder that life's richness lay in shared experiences, openness, and the courage to engage fully with the people around them. Even as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the narrator's thoughts kept returning to Marissa. They thought about how she had balanced grief and joy, how she had created a space where people could feel safe, and how her generosity had transformed the lives of everyone present that night. They felt inspired to emulate her example, to cultivate compassion, and to embrace opportunities to connect and uplift others. By the evening, the narrator knew that this Christmas would remain etched in their memory forever. It had begun with a simple invitation, a step into the unknown, and had blossomed into a night of dancing, laughter, reflection, and deep human connection. They realized that life's most meaningful experiences often arrive unexpectedly, through the kindness of others, the courage to participate, and the willingness to open one's heart. As they finally lay down to rest, the narrator felt a profound sense of gratitude. The night had taught them about resilience, joy, sorrow, connection, and the enduring power of human kindness. They knew that the lessons of this Christmas Eve would continue to guide them, influencing how they approached relationships, challenges, and moments of quiet reflection. The warmth, laughter, and stories of Marissa's home would remain a beacon of hope and inspiration in their life. And in that quiet, serene moment, as the snow fell gently outside and the world remained hushed in the early morning light, the narrator understood something essential. Life's most precious gifts are often the simplest: an invitation, a shared story, a laugh, a dance, and the willingness to open one's heart to another human being. This Christmas Eve had been a celebration not just of the holiday, but of life itself, and the narrator knew they would carry its lessons and its warmth forever.